All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero. I am back for a second stream today. We're not really doing Handmade Hero. What we're doing is working on the editor code. Again, I'm kind of streaming today just because I thought it would keep my mind off the fact that I'm not allowed to eat any food. And in 74 minutes, I will have to start drinking Gavialite C. Now, for those of you who don't know what Gavialite C is, it's not a planet. It's basically just like the medical version of a colon cleanse. So, this is what it is. I have no idea what polyethylene glycol actually does. However, the end effect of drinking a bunch of Gavialite C over the course of 2 hours is that you basically empty out your entire colon, which of course is necessary for a colonoscopy. Fun times. From what I understand, I have never had a colonoscopy before. This is my first time. From what I understand, apparently the act of drinking Gavialite C in the amount that you have to drink it, which is a cup every 15 minutes for 2 hours. So basically 8 ounces every 15 minutes. Apparently that activity is actually the worst part. People say that just having to drink 8 ounces of this thing every 15 minutes is very unpleasant. And I guess it probably varies from person to person, but that's what they say. The actual act of just pooping continuously for a while after it starts to work is apparently not that bad. They say the actual act of emptying the colon, like a colon cleanse, is really not that bad. It's not like painful or annoying or anything like that, but the act of drinking the stuff supposedly is. So we're gonna find out, because I'll actually stream it. I'll go grab the first 2 doses, right? 8 ounces and then 15 minutes, 8 ounces. I'll just drink it. We'll see how bad it is, and then you'll know. And off we go. So we still have 71 minutes of programming to do before that kind of excitement keeps in, right? So let's go ahead and do it. And again, remember, I have had no food today, so I apologize if the programming is a little slower than normal. We're not doing Handmade Hero. These are not for posterity, so I feel like it's okay because we're just doing 4coder upgrades, right? And that's all. So where we left off was pretty cool. We had just implemented the first step of the fbins, which I was talking about before. It's just kind of a little experiment I'm doing to see if I can't improve some of the editor flow from like even the old days. Like I said, 4coder's pretty much caught up with Emacs for me now. In any way that matters for the most part. And so I'm kind of looking at ways of pushing it beyond what I had, you know, because Emacs is certainly not all that I could imagine in terms of editing. So what I did is I made it so that we could have these sort of bins here, and then, you know, if I was in something like Handmade Ray and I did a search for something, we made it so that now those bins remember what's going on. So if I have different searches, I can like ping pong back and forth between them and then kind of like jump around, right? And that's really awesome because that allows me to operate on sort of multiple levels at once. If I'm trying to do a search and I'm trying to do a compile and I want to jump around between locations on the search and error messages, all that stuff will just work now, right? Because when I go to compile, it'll compile here, and so I can keep those things in bins and just switch back and forth between them, which is great. However, in order to get the bins to a place where I feel like they're really effective and interesting, there's a bunch of things that we're going to have to do, and so we need to start kind of working towards that now. We've got the basic idea working, and we need to sort of expand it. And so there's 2 things I want to do. First, let's just fix the drawing a little bit so that it works. I don't know how I'm really going to get 4coder to understand that it should scroll 1 extra line and eventually probably more than 1 extra line up to support these mix bins. So to a certain extent, we kind of have a little bit of an issue there. And I, again, don't really know how I'm going to address it we're going to try to figure out some way to address it, but I don't guarantee that we necessarily can. We may have to edit the core for that. But we'll certainly try not to touch the core if we can avoid it. You know, don't touch the core. The other thing that I would have preferred, and I don't know if this is possible, but I probably would say that we can implement our own buffer switcher now that just wouldn't list fbar buffers. So we probably want to do that eventually too, because I really don't want these fbar buffers in here. You're never meant to switch to them in this way. If we were going to support switching to an fbar buffer, what I would do is just have it so that you pick the active fbar buffer here and then just have a command that's like switch to that would bring it up into your main window. So we'd probably also like to eliminate fbar buffer listing. I think that's probably possible now because since we can list buffers ourselves using our own jump lister, it's probably possible for us to do that. Maybe we should just tackle that right off the bat. Since I think that we can. So let me go ahead and jump back to our actual stable 4coder here that we're actually using for editing. So if you look at how we're pulling up that jump lister in the first place that's doing the listing for buffers, that's assigned right now when I do my switching to modal B. So basically if you have the modal switch on and you hit B, and that's going to interactive switch buffer. Now interactive switch buffer is not something that I implemented. It's actually, let's see here. It's actually defined in 4coder lists. And you can see what it does here is it's actually calling this begin integrated lister buffer list. And that's what's doing the actual work. Now, if I go ahead and clip that out, because I think I'm going to maybe try to override it, we'll see if I can or if I can't. We know that that's what's normally happening in here, and so let's go in and take a look at begin integrated lister buffer list. Let me see here, buffer list, there we go. So in here where we're looking at this, you can kind of see it's got kind of yet another line of sort of another peel of the onion there, where I'm going to say, all right, let's begin the list. That actually calls out to this, which gets these handlers here that are going to be used for the buffer lister, and it's called, it calls into a generic function at that point. This handlers.refresh, which is generate all buffers list, that really looks like the money right there. That looks like what we're actually looking for. So if I come up here and take a look at what this does, you can see this thing doing its thing here, right? And inside here, you can see that when it loops over things, it's just got a certain way that it does stuff. Here's the part where it does the buffers starting with star bit there, right? So first it adds all the ones that don't have a star, and then it adds the ones that do have a star. For our purposes, right, we're probably going to start to be a lot more like focused about how we're dealing with buffers. So I don't really know that we're going to have buffers that have a star anymore. That concept may go away. And we may just have fbin buffers and non-fbin buffers. And so what we really need to do here is we really just need this part, I think. And this part down here just wouldn't be necessary, I don't think. Now, the buffers that are open in views part, I guess what this is doing is it's saying, look, for each of these things here, we're making a list of buffers that are currently being viewed so we can skip them when we build the list so that they show up kind of at the end, right? Because you don't want to, if you're switching buffers, you're not going to switch to a buffer you can already see. So we don't really need that. And that's why that's happening. And then it's getting appended kind of at the end, right? So really it's that buffer starting with star part. This is the part that we would need to fix. And I kind of wonder if maybe this itself shouldn't kind of take that as a kind of parameter. Now, it can't really take it as a parameter directly because it's a lister callback, and this is the refresh, right, of that lister that says, you know, generate all the buffers. So it would need to be a parameter of the actual listers. The user data here that you can see is being passed through, and it's being passed through as a 0. So there is no user data currently being provided to this particular refresh handler. So it would have been free to have there be some user data that had parameters that discussed in generate all buffers how these things were to be filtered. And so my first inclination is really maybe this generate all buffers list should be looking at the list or user data, and maybe it should be using that to determine what it should be doing in here. But to be fair, I don't actually know to what extent that actually needs to happen for us, because if we chose to only eliminate fbin buffers, that means we would be specifically scanning for star fbin, not just star buffers, and we'd still list the other star buffers. So I'm a little bit torn as to whether this really does what we need to do or whether it doesn't. I don't really know. I think I'm going to take the safe course now because it seems like maybe something that we're going to want to do a little bit more specific work on. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out in here and call this KC generate buffers list. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look and see what this is doing and simplify it down to just the things that I actually want to have happen. Now you can see the first thing that Alan's doing here is preparing some space, I guess. I don't really understand why he does memory the way that he does it in this. It's not the way I would have chosen to do it. I would have just had a growable arena here and you just kind of push things on as you go. He does a little bit of a pre-pass. It looks like he really wants to know how much memory is going to be used beforehand. This piece of code happens to be shareable in either case because this is the maximum amount of memory that you would need to use for buffer names. And so I'm going to go ahead and propose here that really that should be pulled out into a separate function, which is essentially like get max buffer name storage, right? And that here would be providing back to you just this operation right here. And I don't know if buffer count still needs to be done here. I assume that it does. It doesn't. So I guess that actually, that's kind of I guess it's not that surprising. So this piece of code right here, I'm going to argue should really be pulled out as a separate thing, which is going to return that memory size to you. So you would just pass it one of these, right? And this would get back that max buffer name storage for you. Now, one of the other things that it's doing here is adding in the buffer count times the size of the lister node part. We don't really want that part. So I'm going to claim that that part is sort of the same in either case, right? So that's going to happen outside here as well, right? Or something like this. In fact, I guess I'll do it in this code down here and then we'll deal with it after. So if we do get back max buffer name storage, that will just take a look at all of the buffers here and add them together. So it's really just this part. And then this part, I guess maybe we'll say is retained, right? So we'll do this, is I guess what I'm saying. We'll add to it get max buffer name storage, and we'll pass the app there. And so this is actually the preamble that allows you to do that. Now we don't actually need this because the get buffer count is never used again. So if we want to, we can actually just say that can be placed here. And then similarly, the memory size itself is really now just a two-term thing. So why not just make that be something that looks like this, and off we go. So you can see it happen here. I don't know what the +3 is. That's some magic that Alan must know. Does anyone have any idea what the +3 is? Yeah, I got nothing, because we're only adding as many buffers as there actually are, I would assume. And so I don't know what the +3 is. Someone should probably explain that to me at some point, but anyway. So again, I'm just trying to do some compression-oriented programming here and say, look, I know what needs to happen here. I have Alan's code. I don't necessarily know exactly why he's doing everything, but I can see what he's doing. And so I'm just going to preserve what he's doing but pull it out into some functions that make it easy for me to reuse just that part. So when I replace the part that he wrote with something that I wrote that does something a little bit differently, we're still calling the same shared code here. And then I can send this back to him and say, hey, do you want to mainline these changes? And hopefully he says yes. If he says no, we just pull them out into our own code and live with it. So either way, it's really not a big deal. But especially when I see mystery constants like this +3 showing up in here, I don't know if that's actually valid or if that should be in there or what's going on. I have literally no idea what's happening there. But since that is happening there, like, hey, we want the lister node +3 bytes. I mean, I have literally no idea what that could be for. And since I have no idea what that could be for, it makes me want to make sure that's pulled out, because in case that's something that's actually really important, I need to make sure that everyone who's going to be doing weird stuff here knows about that and calls it, right? So it's just one of those things that's like kind of mildly terrifying, and if you have something mildly terrifying, you want to make sure that everyone is doing the mildly terrifying thing the same way. That's usually the way I look at it, right? So we're going to do get max lister buffer storage there. We'll pass that in. That's the new memory size part there. So there we go. We've got the new item set thing here, and we've got this sort of code that Alan was doing here. And so what we need now is we just need a way to, you can see here, he's building, like I said, an array of what buffers are being viewed. I don't know if that's actually necessary, because is it really that hard? Like, the views themselves already are that thing, so it seems like you could do that just by asking what views are viewing the buffer. So I'm not really sure that that's necessary. But again, I don't really have to touch this code. So I'm going to say, what if we just did that, and that, and then out in here, again, this stuff is stuff we kind of need to pull back up into this part of the code here as we kind of work it into something smoother. When I generate this buffer list, I'm going to see if there's a way to do this a little bit more directly. So looping over the views that are available or that are visible at the moment feels like it shouldn't be too hard to do. There's only 2 views that exist in my 4coder world. So to some extent, it shouldn't be very difficult for me to find out what those actually are. And so if you look here, this is the code that actually does that. And so if I am just going to look at views that are not the fbin bar, I don't know why I would need to build a separate array. That doesn't really seem necessary unless that get view next call is really expensive, and we'll see if it is. So I'm going to go ahead and open the next tonic water here. It's important to remain hydrated, kids. All right. So I'm going to see if that's really necessary. Let's take a look. Like, what does get view first actually do? I mean, I guess the problem is this. The problem is this fill view summary, right? Because we don't really want that. Like, what we want, this is the whole entirety of the code we want. We just want this panel. Because all we need is the buffer ID that comes from that panel view, and presumably the panel view itself would do it. So really, you know, I might say that this is probably one of those things where the API gets in its own way a little bit. These view summaries are like really overblown for what we need, but a lot of things just have to go through them. So I can understand why this is happening the way that it's happening. It's not, but it's really not what we would want, because it feels like you really shouldn't need it. You know what I mean? But we'll keep it for now. So this is all the same stuff. I don't know why this skip thing is happening. So basically, like, you're coming in here and we're saying if it's already there, we skip out. But why wouldn't you just do the opposite thing? So again, I'm looping through all of the views here, right? So I say, here's the buffer that I'm looking at. It wants to do, it's sort of doing the little n squared, like let me not insert something that I haven't already inserted, right? Because we assume that we want this to go faster, and we don't care if this is slower, right? We're sort of making a decision between those two. And so when I loop over those here and I look at this thing, this tells me whether or not I need to insert it or not, right? And so my first thought is like, can we just not care about that? Because I know I only ever have 3 views, so I feel like this is probably just better because most of the time it would be fine, right? And so I think I'd probably just leave it at that and not really care at the moment, right? That seems just more concise for me, and I know I don't care. Then when we go down here and we loop over these buffers, we're saying, do any of them exist in this thing? Now, one interesting thing about this, you know, if we just had some way of tagging buffers, here's a question for you. So let's say we look at this buffer summary. What's in there? So if you were to look at this stuff, you know, I would almost say that because this is a fairly important thing, it feels like you should be able to just say, for a buffer, give me the view that has this buffer. Like, you know. I just feel like there should be a way to quickly get from a buffer to a view of the buffer if there is one, right? Like that's something that I would just track. Let's keep on going down here. I don't care about the jump lister, jumping, let's see, summary, get view, yeah, it doesn't really seem to have that. No. So there really is no way to get from a view, from a buffer to the view, but I do feel like that should be a thing. Like it seems like that would be better than doing it this way. And it's the kind of thing that people generally need to know. You know what I mean? So I don't know. So in here, yeah, we can do our filtering. We're going to probably do exactly this filtering, and I think we're just going to get rid of this. And then the buffers that are open in views part will just be the same as it was before. So, you know, get those buffers. So I guess the problem here is, so this is why we would need, since we're using this right here, this is why we need to dedupe these. So I guess we can't really get away from deduping them. Oh well. I don't know that I want to do the skipping around part of that. So I might just say that we do the same thing we were doing here, where we do like, you know, this sort of thing. Grab the view buffer ID. If they're equivalent, then we break out. And there's a couple different ways that I can structure this, probably, if I want to, right? I can probably just do this. And then I can just say, look, that's what we're doing, right? So basically, like, grab me the view buffer ID. Let's go through all the ones we have so far. And, you know, if this thing matches the buffer ID that we've got up here, then don't store it, you know? Oh, sorry. I want the opposite of that. So yeah, and because this code is going to be the same pretty much every time, I kind of feel like maybe I'll just pull it out here as well. So actually, am I in the right place here? I'm not. I was accidentally modifying Alan's actual code, which is not what I wanted to do. It's a problem with doing the branching. Sorry about that. That back in here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and restore this code to what it was before I started mucking with it. All right. So yeah, this will remain the same. This happens. We come down here and we'll just take a look at this. I'm trying to think if there's any other way to make that easier. I guess I could say actually probably just something like this, right? Where I just say, look, give me the count and give me the array. And then we'll just do this one time. That just seems a little bit better to me because then we don't have to keep doing it over and over again. So in here, we'll just say, look, here's the test ID. We will do it as a for loop here. And we'll loop over however many you told us there were. Like so. And then we'll just have a result. And in here, if we ever find that we see the one that we were looking for, we'll set the result to true. And then when we return, we can use this ID exists in now to kind of like simplify all this code. So basically, we can just say, look, if the ID doesn't exist in our currently viewed buffer count, buffer is currently being viewed, view.bufferID, right? So if that's the case, then add it. And that's nice. And then down here, we can just do the opposite. So now we can say, look, if the ID doesn't exist in this thing, and some other crap happens to be true, like so on. So you can kind of see it all there, right? We can get rid of the skips. They don't have to be there. And then we're just looking at buffer ID, like so. And so that way, this part here where we're passing these guys down, it's a little verbose because, you know, C doesn't have much support for like closure style discussion of things, but that's fine. So we could just say, look, if this thing doesn't exist and these two things are true, off we go. And then finally, at the end, I think we would say the same thing, right? I don't know why this wasn't doing this before. That's a little confusing. I feel like you still want to check that. Because I don't want to ever list those even if they were being viewed in a view. I just don't want them. So I think that's actually not how that was supposed to go. I don't know, maybe that's a bug in the original or maybe that was intentional. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, now I think that's more what we're looking at. Casey generate buffers list is now going to be more of a command sig kind of a thing, I guess. I don't know why I did this, because I guess now I think about it, this kind of has to happen like this. So I don't know why I merged those two, just wasn't thinking. Like I said, haven't eaten today, so not great. So anyway, in custom command sig, now we'll do, this is interactive switch buffer. This will just be Casey interactive switch buffer. And so here we can do the same sort of stuff we were doing before, where we're going to do most of the other stuff, and the activate switch buffer part should probably still be the same. Excuse me. The only difference here is that this part here is this code, so we just need to like kind of paste this down into here where it belongs and eliminate this part. So there's the handlers getting constructed. Here's like the user data and target view nonsense, right? Like this stuff here. That can just go away now. And now we have, I think, what we actually need. By default, this will still call Alan's lister. I'm going to try that one first just to make sure that I didn't totally destroy the worlds. But then we'll keep going from there. So don't ask me why that's still in there. It's not supposed to be. That's supposed to look like that. And then we have to actually return this, of course. So there we go. Okay. That's good. And I want to test that doing the same jump as before. So if I come in here and hit B, right, I should get totally wrong stuff, right? Like this is not what I want listed, but it should be exactly the same as it was before I made these changes. And it does look like that's the same. Sort of. It does seem a little wonky. I don't know, maybe not. Anyway, so I'm not sure if that's exactly right. I think it is, but anyway. So if I now say that generate all buffers list is like Casey generate buffers list instead, so that basically instead of calling this thing, I'm calling my version of that thing. I'm assuming that now I will have it so that it's not listing those buffers anymore. We don't have to worry about like polluting that list with tons of fbar nonsense, right? Well, that worked phenomenally. Parentheses did not work at all. I don't know what I did wrong there. So Casey generate buffers list. Oh. Duh. We weren't calling it. So that was not a fair test before. Oops. Let's try it again. So let's switch to handmade hero. Switch to buffers, and we should see none. We should just see code, and we do. So that's good. Yeah, that's what I want. Similarly, when I first start up and I switch, I should see nothing. It just should be an empty buffer list, and it is. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. Now what we need to do is, in that bar at the bottom there, we need to start making that bar actually, you know, be something that we... something that we can use legitimately, and it's not going to have... we're not going to have like trouble seeing it and all that other sorts of stuff. So a couple things about that we need to address. So first of all, this isn't working quite right And the reason for that part is I kind of want it to go have a fixed number of lines that would be visible, and it doesn't quite do that it doesn't do that necessarily correctly. And also then when you switch to this version, I want it to just be more percentage based. So it maybe takes 2/3 of the screen when you do this. So it's like 4 lines or 2/3 of the screen, right? And maybe it's not 4 lines, maybe it's actually 5 lines. We'll kind of see where we get to on that. So I'm not sure, but 4 or 5 lines, probably 5. And so we need to fix that toggle as well. Now, the way that toggle is working is there's a function called like set HUD line count, and you call it with the number of lines that you want the HUD to have. The problem with that is we want to set this in 2 different ways. So when we call set HUD line count, and you can see if I do this, where that's being called. So you can see it happening here and here. So what I want to be able to do there is I want to be able to pass something to this that will indicate what it should do in both cases. Both the case where I want to set it to a number of lines and the case where I want to set it to a percentage. My feeling on that, so if I look at global HUD line count, I'm probably just going to cheese out and say something like note if default HUD line count is negative, it's interpreted as a let's say over 64, because we're being maximally cheesy, right? So what I'm saying here is, look, let's get default HUD line count to be something that we can set it to a negative and then it'll still do a percentage. So that way we can do default expanded HUD line count. I can say if I do want to do something like 3/4 of the display or 1/2 of the display, let's call it half for now. I could even make that be a thing, right? So if we now go to set HUD line count and we change how that, like, let me see here. Since we're not using my cool search bins, I've got to do this again. So in here, we'll just say, look, if it's equal to that, we'll pass the expanded HUD line count. And that way we don't really have to worry about it. So I think that would be okay. And then in here, when we do this thing, we'll say, all right, assign it, figure out what's going on here. And what we'll say is, what's the count set to? In the case where the count is greater than 0, we'll set it this way. In the case where the count is less than 0, then we'll set it as a regular proportion. So we'll do count over, and this will be an F32, and this will be an F32 of default HUD line divisor, right? So I think that's all I would really need to do, and then now it should be able to set it to a fixed halfway mark, no matter what your screen resolution is, which is the important part, because I have different screens of different resolutions I run 4coder on. So I can't just hard code the number of lines here. It needs to be aware. So now if I do the insert, okay, that was completely useless. It just isn't working at all. So that's great. We totally crushed it. Good job. So what's going on there? When I do view set split proportion, oh yeah. If it's negative, we got to account for the negative. Actually, I guess I'll just put that right there. There we go. And so now, no matter what the size of the window is, right, these should both work. So when it's this way, it should be about 4 lines, and when it's this way, it should be about half, no matter what the circumstance is. And again, that's a little bit tricky, right? But you see why it needs to be that way. This needs 4 lines to display the F-bin the way I have imagined I want it. And this is just trying to show more of what's in the F-bin. And so it's just arbitrarily, I want to be able to say, look, use this percentage of the screen. I don't care how many lines that is per se, because I don't know how big your screen is. It just needs to be roughly that amount, right? Roughly that proportion of the visible area. So that's all good and everyone's happy and that's fine, right? So let's go ahead and push on to the next thing. So what I want to do now is take a look at the way those F-bins are working and start to try and move some of the commands into them a little bit more properly, right? And so what I want to do is I want to think about all the things that I currently have that are commands that could be pushed through the F-bar instead of being pushed through the regular 4coder pathway that I have in there right now, and start to create a structure for storing those things, right? And so the easiest way for me to do that is just to kind of look down at the modal setup that I've got here and just think about what is actually going to be, relevant. So looking at the fbin h file, or the fbar h file, I'm just going to kind of do something here like fbar commands, and then I'm just going to list the ones that I see that are relevant. So looking at them, right, like set mark, go to next jump, no skips, KC clean and save, change active panel. These are just not commands that need additional explication. So they're just not appropriate for what's going on here. Extended command, maybe, but again, those are supposedly things that don't happen very frequently, so I think we should leave them off for now. Introduce switch buffer, find corresponding file, kill to end of line. Just these are not super important things at the moment anyway. So then looking down a little bit further, go to line, doesn't really be repeatable. Jump to index and jump to definition. Those two things are basically, I would probably categorize them under the operation of jumping, right? So, we have this idea of jumping to a particular keyword there. And so those are both things that are probably going to be relevant, right? Those are going to be relevant commands. And so I'm just going to call that fbar jump for now. So that's just like saying I went somewhere. List all locations is probably also a thing. So we're going to have that be a separate thing. So there's a jump, and then there's also a list of locations. Then we've got list all substrings, locations, save thing, save and make without asking. So that's an fbar build, which is another thing we want to be able to do. We've got, let's see, query replace and replace in range. Those are both definitely ops. So there's like replace. And there's also like search. I guess search forward and search backward are probably different. I'm not 100% sure about that. Let's say they're not for now. Let's be squinky about that. Undo doesn't matter. Switch buffer, not so much. Cut and paste is kind of a whole other ball of wax. Let's think about that in a second, a little bit later. Interactive open redo, yeah, we don't care about any of that stuff at all. Moving around is like a separate ball of wax. So I think these are really the ops that we're talking about here. We want to be able to jump to something, list all of the somethings. We have a build command, replace and search. guess if I had to be honest, I'm not sure that replace and search need to be two different things. It's possible that they should be, but I don't actually know. It seems like replace is just a superset because you can just have like do the operation or do the like the searching, you like go backwards and forwards, and then there's a thing for like replacing the thing that you're on. They kind of seem the same. I think I'm gonna like call that one thing for now, and we'll just see what happens. So we've got those four. What I haven't really quite thought through is what actually happens with cut and paste. I think I do want cut and paste in there, and the question is just, that's not really a command. So I guess we're just gonna call that like fbar insert. So like if you cut something out, it will go into an fbin, and then hitting the insert button, or hitting that fbin will be called an insert fbin. And if you hit that button, it would paste what you had, right, back into the buffer wherever you are. I don't really know, to be completely honest with you. I don't really know how we should be working with these buffers. Like, if you did a bunch of cut and pastes, right? So I cut things out. Maybe I just want to append them to the current fbin. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's a difficult design decision, and I think we're probably just going to have to play with it to see which way I would want it to go, because the problem with it is that cut and paste is like a very frequently used operation. And if you've got these fbins and you're trying to work with them, then the last thing you want is every time that you do any kind of cut and paste operation at all, it mucks with your fbin setup, right? And so it seems to me like you kind of want that to be like a sideband thing. And so at any time you can always rotate what's in an fbin using your using that cut and paste history to just pull things into or out of the fbin in question, right? And so I think what we really want there is to say maybe that's not a thing, and maybe the fbar has like an additional concept here, which is just like every time we do cut and paste, we have the cut and paste history. That was already a thing in 4coder anyway. I think. And so maybe you can just use these fbins as like append buffers if you want. And we'll just kind of have that be like a special case of what's going on. So one of the commands that you always have is like insert the crap from the current fbin into the buffer as a paste operation, right? And I assume, and I guess I don't know, but I assume that you don't want that to be something that interacts directly with fbins ever. So you don't want to just assume that the active fbin, whatever it is the thing that's getting all of your like all of your cuts and pastes. But again, I really just don't know. And I feel like if you have the concept that there's an active fbin and a target fbin, so that basically all of your operations that you're doing go to the target fbin, but the active fbin is like a different thing, it gets too confusing. Like, you need to keep it simple enough that it's usable and your brain isn't like spending more time figuring out how to use the stupid thing than it's saving by having the additional features. So again, it's really just hard to conceptualize. You know, I mean, it's really hard to conceptualize, and maybe the answer is no, you really just want you really just want that to work. I don't know. I'm really at a loss. My brain is not able to like hypothesize, and it's maybe again because I haven't had any food all day. I'm not really able to conceptualize what the usage of this will feel like in practice, and so I can't really do a very good job pre-filtering, you know. And so I'm gonna just have to experiment with it and see what happens. What I will say is we probably want the ability to save more commands than there are fbins, maybe. So we probably want something like fbar command to be a thing, and this is fbar command type, right? And the fbar command type is here, and then there's like the param to it that we've got. So like search and replace would have like 2, and you know, jump would only maybe have 1. And so on. So, yeah, like, if we imagine that that's the case, I could say that every one of these things has the command that's currently in that fbin, but then there's also like some giant like circular buffer of fbar commands or some crap like this that is just, you know, the fbin history count. And there's just, you know, some ridiculously huge number of these things sitting around for me to like pull, you know, kind of pull back. You know, you could do something like that. Now, the problem with that is that the strings themselves have to be memory managed to a certain extent, right? Especially when those things get really large. And so, you know, I almost want to say maybe we could do this in a slightly different fashion and say, rather than try to manage the things that way, what if we just assumed that the history was just a giant buffer that you save? So if I were to say something like this, so using Allen's model of saying there's a start and an end position inside the buffer, and we can query for what that is, then in an fbar command, maybe what we actually store is just that. And then we just have an infinitely long buffer. That's the history. Now, there's a problem with that. And I use the term problem loosely. The problem with that is that history buffer will eventually be infinitely long, just absolutely huge, right? And, you know, you could imagine wanting to remove stuff from the beginning of the history buffer. And if you start to remove things from the beginning of the history buffer, you have a cascading update problem where all of a sudden all of your start and end positions are like wrong. And so I don't really know to what extent we want to think about or deal with that. But it's a real problem, and we can't even really rely on memory to save us because for some reason, and I'm not sure what the reason is, Allen doesn't allow 64-bit buffers. So you can't have just an infinitely large buffer. It won't work. We would hit the 2 gigabyte limit eventually, and all bets would be off, right? And that's a real bummer because other than that one problem, it'd be really nice because it means your history would get saved. Oh, man. I mean, my first inclination is to just say, screw it, let's do that. And then the other thing that we can do is just say, look, if we use an offset, because if we wanted this thing to save and load properly, we would have to have a way of saving what the actual indices into that buffer were, because I don't want to get into the business of escaping them, like having escape strings and stuff. So if we were going to save that information in addition to the data there, then we would also have to have those integers, like for the params and stuff, those would have to be stored. If we were going to store those, then I guess there's no cost in just storing them and storing an offset as well. And then every time you want to remove stuff from the beginning, you just do. So in other words, you do this. And then you have like history first, history buffer start. And so anytime you want to pull something off the beginning, you just inc history buffer start however far you wanted to go. And then the fact that all of these guys happen to be, all of these things happen to be indices into later in the stream is fine. Like, it doesn't matter that happens, right? And so we could just do that. I don't know how good of an idea that is, but, if you imagine something like this, we've got an fbar command here, and then you said, like, this was the history buffer. And that I had the fbar command, which is the history. I mean, I guess that just works. And you just do like, and it's just a rolling index into the thing. This could be a really dumb idea. I am totally willing to believe that this is like really stupid. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud and saying, maybe that's how it goes. Once you have that history, then it seems to me like you can just make a jump lister that's called like load command, and it just shows you your last 4096 commands that you did. And then you just load one into the F bin that you're currently on, and that's a way to just kind of necro old commands right back into service, right? Look, I haven't eaten all day. I don't know what's going on. So I feel like let's just go for it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? So let's just say that's what's going to happen. And then these fbar commands are basically, some kind of, there's some kind of nonsense like this. And each one of the fbar things also has a buffer backing it if it's in the fbin. So, but that's not something that we will actually keep in there normally, right? And so we don't save the whole like search results or anything. We just save the command to do the search into the history, so it doesn't get like unreasonably large really quickly. So I feel like that would probably be okay. Again, the only real question here is what to do about the cut and paste, and I don't know. That part's pretty tough for me to think through. I just don't have an idea of where that goes. Yeah, like I just don't have like a clear thought in my head for like where that goes. For how that's happening currently, like for paste, so we're calling Casey paste and tab right now. Oops. And so this function here, which is the paste function, I'm not sure exactly what it does. So if you look at it, yeah, like there is this notion of a clipboard index. And this is pretty good, right? Like what this does here is it just lets you like rotate the paste that you just did to like a previous paste. Right? And so maybe I don't really need to worry about paste that much, and it can just be it can just use what Alan's already did. I don't actually know how well that works, so let's just try it. So we've got Casey paste and tab, and I'm gonna shove this paste next thing in there on E because I don't have anything bound to E at the moment, so we can just do that and see what it does. And then we'll kind of go from there. U64, it looks like I didn't define yet. I'll make one of those because I'm going to need that probably for a bunch of stuff. So if I go ahead and do a uint64t and make that a u64, then I can keep on keeping on. If I run this and launch the thing, let's see how that actually works in practice. So if I switch projects to handmade ray or something, if I come in here and cut that and then cut this, or sorry, copy, not cut, and then I do like F, so that's pretty good already. I just didn't have anything bound to that because I don't think that existed when I first did it. I think Alan added that. So maybe that's just good enough. And maybe we don't really need to think too hard about cut and paste. So maybe really mostly what I need is to just think about how can I display those down here so that it's a little bit more clear what they are, right? So if we look at how these fbins are set up, you could imagine having like some extra room on the side for status that just shows what the current paste setup is. You know what I mean? And there's a couple other things that I would want that for anyway. Like, I would want to know what the Alt Tab would have been. I've wanted that for a while, so that as I'm typing, it just shows me what my Alt Tab would be if I hit it at any given time, so I don't have to guess. So some things like that that show what that is would be nice. These would be getting kind of small at that point. I don't know how much that actually matters, to be completely honest with you, but I also don't know how many F-bins I need in practice. Maybe that we don't really need 12 F-bins anyway, like maybe 10 F-bins is fine, right? So let's see what we can do with that. We'll just start slow. And by the way, we're getting close, right? 8 minutes, 50 seconds. So let's see what we can do with how Alan's got this paste next thing set up. So like the way he's got this now is he's got this paste index thing with the clipboard index stuff. I'm assuming so I guess I don't know if I can just access what those things are, like and also, this is what I actually need, isn't it? That's actually just the same thing. So Casey paste and tab doesn't need to be here anymore either. So that's cool. Like that took away some of the custom stuff and it's just in 4coder proper now. So I guess what I would say is the part that I mainly don't know, right? I'm not quite sure. I don't super understand how I would get these. So it seems like clipboard index maybe is just a thing that says when you do oh, well, actually, maybe that's actually getting that thing. I don't know. Let's go look at clipboard index. So is that how is that defined? Because it's in here. Here it is. So yeah, it looks like that just gets us what we want. So if I just call clipboard index repeatedly, and I guess I don't actually know how many of those there actually are. But that's probably also explained in here. Because the paste index keeps getting incremented continuously. I don't see anywhere that it wraps that. Yeah, so I don't really know what I'm doing, but that's okay. So let's just try this and see what happens. So if I go into the rendering code and I just like butt stomp the first part of this buffer with my own rendering that shows what's in there, let's just see what happens. Excuse me. So in here, we'll look if we're in the global HUD view and we do our little rectangle dance. Again, all this code is something that we're going to have to improve substantially, and that's fine. But right now, we just want to get everything working. So what I want to do is I do want to be able to get this custom variable, managed variable thing working, because I need to be able to know like where we are in that ring. So ideally, I would have something like this, which is like, here's what the previous, paste index was, just so I can get that. And then I also have this, which allows me to get like individual paste index stuff as we go. Now, this tells me how big it is, I think. And then I need to like have some room to grab it, I guess. But I don't actually want to do that anyway because I can only print in this little summary view a few characters of it anyway. So I can only really give the user like a hint about about like what it is, and then I can also say how big it is, I guess. I could add that as part of what I'm printing out, perhaps. But, you know. So let's go ahead and do a for I loop here, and let's loop over a bunch of these and see what happens. So if I say, board index, and I just say, give me, I don't know, we're going to show 16 of these. Who cares? So I just go over each of these in turn, and I say, give me this particular one. This will tell me how big it is, and then I can also say, look, give me the first 16 characters of it, and I know that I can't tell you any more than that. Then clipboard index. Then when we do this here, what's the 0 for, by the way? Is that clipboard ID? So maybe there's multiple clipboards. Oh, okay. It should always be 0. It's probably for if there's multiple clipboards, yeah. All right. So we're just going to say, look, go through each of these. Let's find out what the length is. That's good. Then let's also just get the thing, right? And then when we come out of here, we should have the ability to print this thing, right? So I can make a string here, which is the like this board equals make string of len temp, and now I've got that. Why Alan doesn't return strings, I'll never know. He seemed really reticent to do so, but I think the string is a really useful little thing he made here, so I would just always return them, because that way you don't have to do this all the time. Anyway, once I have one of those, I'm just going to draw it, and we'll see what happens. So there it is. Not going to deal with any of this. I'm just going to put this at like 0, 0, I guess. And yeah, that's it. So I want to be able to move this down each time, so I'm going to make a y param here that I can use for passing. And so I'll start with the y param being at the back region. So this is basically the border of the thing I'm drawing into. It's going to start there. And each time through, I'll just increment by however big one line is. So in Alan's parlance, that's this thing, right? And so what I can do is just, this will let me move the thing down one each time. And I'll put an X in there as well, which will just be, for now, the left flush border. I think that will give me the ability to see everything in there. I think. I don't actually know. Again, not my code. I don't. I only know some basic stuff. All right. So I don't know what scope is here, to what extent that is a thing. It looks like it's for the particular view. I don't really know. So what I'm going to do there is say, look, let's get that for the active view. Meaning not necessarily the view we're drawing, but let's get it for whatever the active view is, and we'll go from there. Because that's the one we actually would care about, I think. And then when we do this nonsense here, all right, it's time. Hold on, folks. I will be right back. Hello, hello. There we go. All right, so let's see what's going to happen here. This is 16 ounces of Gavolite C. Now, I don't actually know what Gavolite C is. However, what I assume it is some kind of a preparation of water that prevents all the water from being filtered out of your colon too soon, so that you basically flush everything out. Because I'm assuming if you just drank water, it would all get absorbed rather quickly and end up in your bladder, which is not the thing you're trying to clear out, right? I don't know. Not a doctor. Maybe that has absolutely nothing to do with it. We could go read about it if we cared, but we don't. So, again, never done a colonoscopy before, have no idea how this is going to be. Everyone says it's awful. In the next half hour, will have to drink this whole thing. I'm supposed to drink 8 ounces every 15 minutes. So right now, what we're going to do is drink it from the 16-ounce line down to the 8-ounce line. And then after another 15 minutes, I've set the timer again. I will drink it from the 8-ounce line down to the 0-ounce line. And the stream will basically be over once I have to go to the bathroom and start, because I'm assuming that clearing out my colon will not be pleasant and I won't want to stream during it. All right, you ready for this? Here we go. And this is supposed to be awful. People say it's annoying to have to drink this much and it's disgusting or something. So I will tell you how it is. We'll see how it is. That is a weird flavor. So I guess here's what I'd say. It's really not bad. So I'm assuming that, well, either I'm just not particularly sensitive to it, or it's just because you have to drink so much of it, right? By the time I get done with 1 gallon of this crap, well, half a gallon, and then I guess, I don't know. It's split into 2 sections. That's about right. So what I would say is, I'm assuming that the problem is not so much that it's disgusting, because that is not disgusting. Like, of the stuff you could have to drink for medical purposes, I guarantee you that is not one of the worst. I'm sure there's stuff that tastes a lot worse than that. So I'm guessing that the problem is just that after, the 4th one of these, you are pretty unhappy with having to continue to drink something that tastes like that, because it's certainly not delicious, right? So anyway, that was it. Happy birthday, colonoscopy. So yeah, we still got how much time left in this stream? Maybe we can finish it, maybe we can't. I think we still got, like an hour. Maybe? I don't know. I don't know how much time we got, but our timer thing probably would tell us. All right. That stuff feels weird to drink, I guess. The thing that I would say most about it is just feels odd having drank that. All right. Hopefully that's supposed to happen. If I suddenly die on stream, someone please call the doctor. So anyway, looking back at what we were doing here, couple things I don't really know. I don't know where we're supposed to get this stuff from, the scope. I assume we're supposed to get it from the managed view, from the active view, because what we're trying to ask, or what we're trying to display, is if I was going to paste something into the view I'm currently working on, what would get pasted, right? So that seems pretty straightforward to me, I would assume. Okay, so now we come back here. We don't really need the len twice. So I guess what I would say is this part here that actually gets it, I'm going to do that same trick. So this len here is the actual length, the total length of the thing. And then we got a string back, and the string is actually not the whole thing, right? Because we are intentionally not passing something that can actually hold the whole thing, because we're not going to actually do that, right? We're not going to... we don't actually need to capture the entire thing because we don't have room to display it. So I may want to know how big it is because I may want to draw it in that regard. But other than that, right, we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's do that. I'm going to call condense whitespace, which is a function I wrote that basically takes a string and removes all the whitespace from the beginning to the end, and anywhere that there was whitespace inside it, it condenses it down to a single space, right? And so I'm going to try that, and we're going to see what happens. I don't know why I did view height. This was supposed to be line height. Sorry, but again, like, you know, not having eaten all day, not a great way to program. Not a great state for your mind to be in. There's a reason that fasting monks are not the people who programmed most of the things in the world. It's because you really want food. So anyway, let's just go through here and get this basic part working, and then we'll see whether this worked at all. What is going on here? We have a, let's see, scope, active view ID. What is it complaining about? Oh, we already have the active view. Is that true? Oh, awesome. So I already have the active view, so I really don't need to get it. I can just use the one that I already got there. Managed variable. All right, so apparently the previous paste index is not an int32. So when this thing was doing a managed variable get, where was that? I think it was just in paste next, right? So when it's doing, oh, I see. We pass it a thing to feed into. I don't know why I set it equal to something. I guess I was just being random. So if I do previous paste index equals 0 and then I get it, this has to be apparently a uint64. That seems fine. I don't care what it is. Then the make string needs to get squinkier. So clipboard index is supposed to return the length. I think I just have the order of these wrong because, yeah. And then total length isn't used. That's correct. So let's get rid of that. Oops. So in theory, that's going to work. I agree it's not a great theory. So let's see. I don't know why that says temp. Did I do something stupid? I don't think so. So that's just what the clipboard is actually returning, I guess. I don't know. I wonder if that's a bug. Is it supposed to be doing that? Like, is it supposed to have temp in the clipboard the entire time? I don't know. Let's go ahead and see what happens if I start using this now. If I cut and paste that, that's not looking good, if we're honest, right? I don't know what's going on there. So we're not doing this right. I don't know what it is exactly that we're not doing right. But it's something. And so clipboard index, let's go back and look at how that's supposed to be used. So here's one question. Maybe clipboard index can't handle it if you don't pass something big enough to fit. Like maybe it isn't qualified. It doesn't have the ability to truncate. Maybe? I don't really know. But let me see if I can find it. So clipboard index, Yeah, I guess I don't know. Let's look at the implementation. So here's where it actually happens. Interesting. So it first says, give me back a pointer to an internal string that is the one that we're talking about, right? Then it says, if that was valid, set the size equal to that size. Assuming they give us a pointer, make a string that is the, you know what, I don't know what that does. Make string cap. I'll have to look. So it's creating an out string that's out of the out duster. Then it's doing a copy between the two strings. So that must just be making a string. Oh, you know what that probably stands for? Probably stands for make string capacity. And it probably says, look, here's the buffer that we're using. Here's the size it can accept, and it doesn't have anything in it yet. Then do a copy, right? Now the problem is, it doesn't tell us how much it actually filled. So we would have to actually do that ourselves. Again, this is why returning a string would have been nice, right? Because we don't know how much it actually filled. So we have to actually do the comparison ourselves to see if the thing would have fit or if it wouldn't have fit. And that's just kind of annoying, right? So in here we get the total length. We would know what that was coming out of here. In this case here, we now need to make a string out of the total length. This thing that it returns is not going to do it for us, right? So instead, and I guess now that I think about it, we only need to call this once as a result. We can call it with the actual truncated version and then get the total length out this way, remove that. So in here now, we will have the total length, and what we would want to do is say well, I guess I can do that directly in here. When I make this string, here's, the actual contents in theory, and then I need to say that the length is going to be the total length if and only if it's less than the array count of temp, right? So if it's less than the array count of temp, then great, use it. If it's not, use the array count, right? Again, don't really think that's going to fix my problem, though. I mean, maybe it will, but I think we've got more going wrong than just that. And yeah, you could, didn't mean to do that. You can kind of see that's still wrong. So what am I screwing up here, folks? If the total length that comes back is less than the array count, use it. Otherwise, use the array count. So shouldn't that, that should be returning 0 to me, right? So the length of this thing should be 0, I think. Because this should be 0, and it should say if 0 is less than array count, use 0 as the length of the string. So maybe condensed white space is broken. I don't know, could be. So we pass the string to that thing. I still think that should work. I'm going to have to step into this because I'll be completely honest with you, I have no idea what's happening. I don't know why we're getting that garbage in there. It doesn't seem right. I probably have like a stupid typo, and it probably has something to do with the fact that I haven't eaten today, which is not good. Not where I want to be with my life. Also, we only have, actually, you know what? 6, 5, 4. Here we go. All right, so now we got to do this nastiness again. So here is the remaining 8 ounces of Gavolite C. I don't know how much of this I have to drink total. Let's compute it real quickly. We can, in fact, even use the math features that I added. So we know that we have 2 hours. Each hour contains... Well, you know what? Let me drink it first. Each hour contains 4 15-minute blocks, and we have 2 hours, right? So we know that we've got 8 total blocks of 15 minutes. Each one of those we have to drink 1 8-ounce serving, so that's 64 ounces of Gavolite C. I don't know how many ounces are in a gallon. Oh, why did I do that over here? Why don't I just do it over here? $128. So basically what we're doing is we're drinking a half gallon of Gavolite C, and we're drinking it in 8-ounce things every 15 minutes. And I have a gallon of Gavolite C, and I think what happens is tomorrow I drink another gallon. Right? Medicine. Could be worse. They could be attaching leashes to me. Anyway, so getting back to where we're going, what we're trying to get working here. So something is not going well for us, right? And I don't know what it is because I feel like this should be working okay, and I'm not sure where we're getting off track because I feel like this total length call here, this should be doing what we need it to do. And it ain't. So we got to figure out why, right? We got to figure out why we're getting that. We got to figure out why we're getting that error in there. So let's go ahead and see what's going down. Maybe it's the condensed white space part. I don't know. Let's just try to step in there and get a clue. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set a breakpoint on condensed white space as a start. And we'll see what happens. So let's see. In fact, it is that, exact call. That's why I picked it, because I was like, I think the only place that'll be getting called at the moment is here. So what's happening? Unfortunately, we're in release mode, which of course Visual Studio is never able to really handle. But you know, maybe we'll get lucky. All right, so this board came back with a total length. It says 9, and total len here is what's in the buffer. That seems good to me. That's what we would want. So I'm not sure why we would be getting an error in drawstring for printing that. That should work, right? Step in there. Oh, are we off by 1 here for some reason? Okay, we hadn't actually done... Never mind. That was misleading. We hadn't actually done that yet. So here we are actually performing the call to condense white space. So it is possible that we still screw this up, right? So let's go ahead and do that. We're copying A to itself, which seems safe. So again, that looked just fine. Get color should be fine. We're going to hop into draw string, and we're passing the string down here. Is it still valid? Sure seems like it. So when we actually step through the code, I don't know why we would be having a problem with that. So maybe we're getting like an invalid font or something, or I don't know. But like it looks like we're passing a valid string down. It just, the drawing doesn't seem to be working. And you can see it reading off as it goes. I don't know. I guess maybe in translating fully processed byte, is it possible that that is generating something bad, like we have the language set up wrong or something, or the font pointers are garbage, or I mean, that does look bogus there. Again, this is release mode build, so I'm not 100% certain it actually has that right, but if it did, it could be because the font is garbage. I don't know what to make of that. Maybe our font is not getting... Maybe our font is not getting so I don't know. Like, I was expecting to see something else there. I wasn't expecting to see what I saw. So now I'm not sure where we're getting that. Why we were getting that bug. Maybe I ran the wrong version. I don't know. It seemed bad. But let's see. So here we go into Handmade Hero. I'm going to start cutting and pasting things now. So there we go. Like, now it's broken. But only just now. Oh, so is it just when something's too long? It's just when something's too long. So it only seems to be happening if we provide a buffer that is too small for the copy that's coming in. Right? So that's very interesting. So if I re-break here, that may give us some insight into the problem. I'm going to hop back here. I'm going to set a breakpoint here. And I'm going to come in and see what happens. So if I say total length, it's 27. That's what we expect. What's inside the temp buffer is nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is, I don't know if the word bug is appropriate here, because maybe this isn't what's supposed to happen, but it does seem like when we jump into this part of the code here, this doesn't seem to be copying in anything. Like, it's returning a size value that's completely bogus, in a sense. Like, it's telling us that it's this big, and it's returning that size value regardless of how much it copies in. So we then have no idea how much it copies, and it doesn't seem to copy as much as it could have copied. So what's happening inside that copy function? Let's take a look. But that seems to be our problem. So inside here where we call copy, how do I get a look at that? So I think that's a string, 4coder string. Oops. And that would be from a string to a string. So that's this one here. So that would call copy SS. Right? Copy checked SS, I guess. So yeah, I mean, that's gonna do it. Unfortunately, what I would rather it have done there is clamped the size so we could at least copy uh, the rest of the thing. Like, is there a reason we can't just do this? Right? I mean, copy as much as you can. And I'll let Alan suss that out. He's probably already got something that effectively does that. But, you know, basically what we're talking about is just saying, hey, copy size equals the destination size. So that's how much we're going to copy in, right? But if the copy size is, or rather, I guess I want to say this the other way. This is how much we would like to copy. If we would exceed the space that exists in the buffer, then we just set it to that much. So it just clamps it down, right? So then we can just proceed as normal using this copy size, and then it'll just work in all cases. And if we would have overflowed, we only use like a if it would have overflowed, we just use however much we could have used. So the return value in this case is just to tell us whether we could or couldn't fit the whole thing. We can still retain that behavior by basically saying, look, assume that we succeed, and in the case where we have to clamp, we fail. Right? Yeah, I guess that's it. So then what I would say is, hey, man, like, give me, you know, give me as much as you can out of the clipboard buffer, and then we don't have to worry about this so much, right? So now I think I would probably be able to get this going, right? Now I hope if I start to get larger things than fit in the buffer, it would just work. So, you know, if I cut that whole line, all right, or not. Grr, what did I do wrong there? If the copy size is greater than the destination memory size, the copy size equals the destination memory size, and then we fail. Our result, the destination string is what it is. We copy that much. That all looks fine, doesn't it? What's wrong with that? Oh, I'll tell you what's wrong with that. We're not building 4coder. I had commented that out because we were only working on the custom layer. So that change wouldn't take effect. Now it will have. All right, so if I go ahead and run, hopefully now we can get into a better place. Yeah, perfect. All right, cool. So now we've got that status update. Uh-oh, we've only got 42 seconds left till we gotta drink another 8 ounces of this stuff. Let's turn back off that compile because we don't really need to be doing that most of the time. I gotta go get more. Hold on a second. All right, folks, here we go. I got to be careful because I don't drink this whole thing. I just drink down to the 8-ounce line. Looks about right. So how much have we done so far? So 5:30 to 6:30. So yeah, so we have done, by the time I drink this one down, which I will before the end of the stream, by the time I drink this one down, we will have drank half of the Gaviolite C for tonight. All right. So there we go. Let's keep going on here. So we got that listing working there pretty well. And so that seems fine to me. And also, I wanted that auto tab thing to happen too. So let's take a look at where we get that information from. So inside my, let's see here. Where's tab? Word complete. So let's look at the implementation of word complete. I have no idea what that does. Let's see. So I guess what I would say about that is that looks way too expensive. Yeah, all right. So that might just be too difficult. I don't know. I mean, I guess what I would say is I think this certainly could be made to be something that just works and we could call on every character and it wouldn't be a problem. But I don't think I want to tackle that. So I guess we won't have that feature. That's fine. So yeah, so the question then becomes, I guess, what we want to know now is if I, have it in this view, I guess I want to leave a little bit of space for that here, and we'll just move everything over in terms of the bins, and we'll just leave this as something separate, right? Like that can just be its own thing. So let me go ahead and switch over there to the render. And what we'll do is we'll just say, yeah, before the bins happen, right here, we'll go ahead and make that work. And one of the interesting things about it is we couldn't just treat it as an initial bin, because actually we were kind of previously doing that. Like, I have bin 0 is intentionally not displayed. It's sort of like a phantom bin. So I figured I wanted to have a null bin potentially. And so what I could do is just say, oh yeah, like the thing is going to be based on the number of bins total, and the bin goes this way, I guess. And that way there'd be like one bin just kind of like phantom sitting there with nothing on it, right? And so like this right here would be the cut and paste listing would go right there, right? And then all the F bins happen after that. And so that way you could always see what that was. And if you zoom up, you can get more of them. And we could make it so that we just do a lot more than 16 as well. Like it's got the whole cut and paste history in there. And then, oops, that's not what I want to do. So if we actually did it that way where we just kept going, and in fact, I could do this a little bit differently. So what I could do is say, look, just keep going. I don't care how long you do it, right? Just keep going until the Y coordinate in question passes outside of the view, right? So as long as the Y is on this side of the visible area of this sort of gutter window thing we're making, just keep going, and that way we'll just ask for as many as we actually need to fill it, rather than saying 64 should be enough for anybody or whatever. Just like, look, we'll do as many as fit, right? And so if I take a look here at at the pluses, ooh, you know what? I think the colon cleanse is starting. So I think we're gonna have to call the stream. We almost made it to the next round of Gavelite, but not quite. So I'm going to have to go colon cleanse myself. It will not be pleasant, folks, but you know, trust me, you're lucky you don't have to be a part of it. Wow, and that was the end of the stream too. I guess we timed that pretty darn well, if I do say so myself. We timed that pretty darn well. Well, let's verify. Let's just close this down, and let's verify that it worked, and then we'll say goodnight. And I'll talk to you after I've had someone stick a camera literally up my butt. That's like actually what's about to happen. Okay, so if I look here, let me see. Did I recompile that? I don't actually know if I did or if I didn't. Here we go. Hello? Is there a reason that didn't build? Switch. 4coder. Build. Oh, yeah, there it goes. All right, so we're built, and we ran. There we go. Perfect. So we still got more to do. Maybe we'll do some more after someone has stuck a camera up my butt. You know, no promises. I may just go finish this stuff on my own. I only really wanted to stream it today because I just figured it would keep my mind off the fact that I hadn't had anything to eat, which, you know, I'm a person who likes to eat, so that was not fun and continues to not be fun. But all right, thank you so much for joining me. And I guess I will, if I don't stream any more 4coder streams this week, then I will see you this weekend for the return of Handmade Hero, which I'm looking forward to. So hope to see you back here this weekend for that. Check the handmade.org/watch page for more info on that. Otherwise, have fun programming, folks, and I'll see you on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.